I was 68 years old when I laid to rest my husband of 42 years. Yet the people seated in the front row of his funeral were complete strangers to me. I had never seen them before, not once in my life. My name is Charlotte Morrison, and I'm speaking to you from my home in Portland, Oregon. Before I continue with what happened next, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. I'd really love to know who's listening to my story. Now let me take you back to that heartbreaking week in March. My husband, Robert, everyone called him Bob, suffered a massive heart attack while out golfing with his Thursday group. He was gone before the ambulance ever arrived. 42 years of marriage ended in an instant on the 7th hole of Riverside Country Club. The days that followed passed in a blur. Funeral arrangements, paperwork, decisions I never imagined making alone. Our daughter Jessica flew in from Boston, and our son Michael drove up from Sacramento. Together, they helped me select the casket, choose Bob's navy suit, and write his obituary. Everything felt unreal, as if I were watching someone else's life collapse from a distance. The service was scheduled for Saturday at Morrison and Son's funeral home. No relation to us, just an unfortunate coincidence that somehow made everything feel even more unsettling. Jessica, Michael, and I arrived early, standing near the entrance to greet guests as they came in. Bob's golf friends, neighbors, people from the community center where we volunteered, familiar faces offering familiar condolences, and then I noticed them. 3 people I had never seen before walked straight past the guest book and took seats in the front row, not off to the side, not in the back. Right in the center where immediate family sits. There was a woman in her late 50s with sharp features and perfectly styled gray hair. Beside her, a heavy-set man around the same age with cold, unreadable eyes, and a younger woman, maybe 30, who kept checking her phone. I leaned toward Jessica and whispered, "Do you know who they are?" She shook her head slowly. Maybe Dad's old coworkers? But Bob had retired from his engineering firm 8 years earlier. These weren't people from his retirement party or the Christmas gatherings. I would have remembered them. Throughout the entire service, the 3 strangers remained stone-faced. They didn't cry during the eulogy. They didn't bow their heads during the prayer. They simply watched, intently, making my skin crawl. When it was time to approach the casket, the older woman stepped toward me. She didn't offer condolences. Instead, she studied my face, as if committing it to memory. Then she said words that made my heart stop. "We'll be in touch, Charlotte." She knew my name. I didn't know hers. Before I could respond, the 3 of them turned and left, walking out ahead of everyone else. Through the funeral home windows, I watched them gather near a black Mercedes in the parking lot, standing close, speaking in low voices. The older woman gestured sharply, clearly upset. "Mom." Michael touched my arm. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I hadn't seen a ghost, but I had the dreadful feeling I'd seen something far worse, people who knew things about my husband that I didn't. I had no idea how right I was. The days after Bob's funeral passed in a fog of sympathy cards and casseroles, from neighbors, most of which I couldn't bring myself to read or eat. Jessica stayed 3 days before flying back to work, and Michael left the next morning. Suddenly, the house that once felt too small for 2 people felt painfully large for 1. I kept myself busy with the practical rituals of grief, thank you notes, insurance forms, sorting Bob's clothes for donation. Every drawer I opened felt like an invasion, even though he was gone. His reading glasses on the nightstand, his coffee mug still in the dish rack, the crossword book on his side of the couch, a pen marking the spot where he'd stopped forever. And still, I couldn't stop thinking about those 3 strangers. Who were they? How did that woman know my name? And what did "we'll be in touch" really mean? I got my answer exactly 1 week after the funeral. It was Tuesday afternoon around 2 o'clock. I was in Bob's study, sorting through decades of files and paperwork, when the doorbell rang. Through the sheer curtain on the front window, I saw 2 figures standing on the porch, the older woman and the man from the funeral. My hand froze on the desk drawer. Every instinct screamed at me not to open the door, but they'd already seen movement inside. The woman leaned closer to the glass, peering in. I took a breath and opened the door, keeping the chain lock fastened. "Can I help you?" Up close, she looked even harder than she had at the service, sharp cheekbones, thin lips, expensive clothing. The man beside her crossed his arms, taking up space as if he owned it. "Charlotte Morrison," the woman said crisply. "My name is Patricia Crawford. This is my brother Dennis. We're Robert's family." The words didn't register. "Excuse me?" "Robert's family," she repeated slowly, as if I were dense. His sister and brother. We need to discuss some important matters concerning his estate. The ground felt like it shifted beneath me. Bob didn't have siblings. He was an only child. Patricia smiled a cold, blade-sharp smile. Is that what he told you? How convenient. Dennis spoke for the first time, his voice gravelly. We need to come inside, Charlotte. There are things you should know about your husband. Things he never told you. I don't understand. Of course you don't, Patricia snapped. That's why we're here to explain Robert's real life. Before he reinvented himself in Oregon. Before he became Bob Morrison and played house with you. The way she said played house made my blood run cold. 42 years of marriage reduced to a game. I think you should leave, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. We will, Dennis replied, but we'll return with lawyers if necessary, because half of everything in this house, he gestured broadly, legally belongs to the Crawford family, including the house itself. Then they turned and walked away. I slammed the door and locked it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. My heart pounded as I leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Bob's family, the Crawford family, half of our house. None of it made sense. Bob had always told me he was an only child. His mother died of breast cancer when he was 19. His father passed from a stroke 2 years later. He had shown me their graves in Seattle early in our relationship. I'd placed flowers there, held his hand while he cried. Had it all been a lie? I stumbled back to the study. Bob's desk suddenly felt different, as if every drawer was hiding a secret. With trembling hands, I pulled out files, tax returns, mortgage papers, insurance policies. Everything listed Robert James Morrison. Born January 15, 1953. Seattle, Washington. Social security number, driver's license, bank accounts. But what if that wasn't the full truth? I called Jessica. Mom, what's wrong? You sound upset. Those people from the funeral, I said, my voice breaking. They came here. They say they're your father's siblings. They say his real name was Crawford. They claim they own part of the house. There was a long pause. That's insane, Jessica finally said. Dad was an only child. You need to call the police. And say what? I asked. They didn't threaten me. They just, Mom, stop. You're grieving. These people are con artists trying to scare you. But I couldn't forget the look in Patricia Crawford's eyes. She didn't seem like a scammer. She seemed convinced. After Jessica hung up, promising to call Michael and help find a lawyer, I sat alone in the study as the afternoon light faded. I stared at the photographs on Bob's desk. Our wedding in 1981. The kids growing up. Vacations to Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, Disneyland. Were any of those memories real? Or had I been living with a stranger for 42 years? Eventually, I opened Bob's laptop. I had never gone through his computer before. We had always trusted each other. But trust was no longer something I could afford. His password was our anniversary. 0612. The screen opened to his email inbox, mostly spam and golf newsletters. And that's where everything truly began. I spent nearly an hour searching his computer for anything connected to Crawford Patricia Dennis. Anything at all. I found nothing. Then I noticed a folder buried in his documents, labeled Seattle 1975. My hand hesitated before I clicked it open. Inside was a single PDF file, a scanned newspaper article from the Seattle Times, dated April 3, 1975. The headline alone made my stomach drop. Crawford family patriarch dies in boating accident. Questions remain about missing son. And there, beneath the headline, in a grainy black and white photograph, was my husband's face. Younger, harder, but unmistakably Bob. My vision blurred as I stared at the screen. The article was brief, just a few paragraphs describing a wealthy Seattle businessman named Thomas Crawford who died after his sailboat capsized during a storm on Puget Sound. It listed his surviving family, his wife Margaret, daughter Patricia, son Dennis, and younger son Robert. Robert Crawford, who had vanished 2 weeks before his father's death and had not been seen since. The article ended with a single chilling sentence. Police are asking anyone with information regarding Robert Crawford's whereabouts to contact Seattle authorities. I clicked through the folder desperately, hoping for more. There was nothing else. Why would Bob keep this? Why hold on to proof of a life he'd supposedly abandoned? I grabbed my phone and searched Robert Crawford Seattle 1975. More articles appeared, each one filling in pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to finish. The Crawford family had owned a massive commercial real estate empire in Seattle. Thomas Crawford's death had officially been ruled an accident, but questions had surrounded the timing of Robert's disappearance. One article, published 6 months later, reported that Robert Crawford had been declared legally dead after his car was found abandoned near the Canadian border. The family held a memorial service. His name had been carved into his father's headstone. But Robert Crawford hadn't died. He became Bob Morrison. He moved to Portland. He met me at a library fundraiser in 1979. We married 2 years later. We built an entire life on a lie. I don't know how long I sat there rereading those articles. Time lost meaning. Then the doorbell rang again. I jumped, my heart racing, convinced Patricia and Dennis had returned. But when I peeked through the window, I saw a young woman standing alone on my porch, the third person from the funeral. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder like she didn't want to be seen. Against my better judgment, I opened the door just a crack. "Mrs. Morrison," she said softly, "please don't close the door." Her voice was hesitant, unsure. "I'm Natalie Crawford, Patricia's daughter. I need to talk to you, but they can't know I'm here. I don't want to talk to anyone from your family." "I understand," she said quickly, "but there are things my mother isn't telling you. Things you need to know before she comes back with lawyers." She glanced behind her again. "Please, just 5 minutes. I'm trying to help you." Every instinct told me not to trust her. But she looked genuinely frightened, and I was desperate for answers. I opened the door and let her inside. Natalie hurried in and immediately stepped away from the windows. "My mother and uncle don't know I'm here. They think I drove back to Seattle, but I stayed. Something about all this feels wrong. Your mother claims she's Bob's sister." "She is," Natalie said. "Robert Crawford was her younger brother, but the story she's telling you that they're here only for the estate. That's not the full truth." She took a shaky breath. "Mrs. Morrison, my grandfather died under suspicious circumstances, and my mother has always believed Robert was responsible." The room felt smaller. "What are you saying?" "In 1975, my grandfather, Thomas Crawford, drowned after falling from his sailboat during a storm. But here's what my mother never told the police." Natalie twisted her hands nervously. 2 weeks before the accident, she overheard my grandfather and Robert having a huge fight in my grandfather's study. She was only 23, but she heard everything. What were they fighting about? Money. Control of the company. My grandfather planned to cut Robert out of the inheritance because of business deals Robert had made behind his back, risky investments that nearly bankrupted one of their properties. She swallowed. My grandfather called him reckless. Said he'd never let Robert touch the family business. I sank onto the couch, my legs barely holding me. "And then your grandfather died, and Robert disappeared the same week." "Yes." Before anyone could question him, the police investigated, but there wasn't enough evidence. When Robert's car was found abandoned near Canada, everyone assumed he either ran away out of guilt or, she paused, or took his own life. But he didn't. No, he came here, changed his name, started over. Natalie sat across from me. "I've spent the last week going through old family papers my mother keeps in storage. I found something." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. It was a handwritten letter on yellowed paper. The date at the top read May 1975. "This is a letter Robert wrote to his mother a month after he disappeared. It was never mailed. My grandmother found it years later in a box from his apartment." She pointed to the text. "He admits he was in financial trouble and couldn't face his father. But he also says he had nothing to do with the boating accident. He says he left because he knew his family would blame him no matter what." I stared at the image, recognizing Bob's handwriting instantly even after all those years. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because my mother plans to claim Robert killed my grandfather and then stole his inheritance by faking his death. She wants to sue your estate for wrongful death. Go after your house, your savings, everything." She met my eyes. "She's waited 49 years for revenge. And now that Robert is finally dead, she's coming for you." My blood turned cold. "Can she really do that?" "I don't know," Natalie admitted, "but she has powerful lawyers, and she truly believes she's owed something." Then she leaned forward. "I've read everything, the police reports, the family records. There's no actual evidence Robert was involved. Just suspicion, resentment, family hatred. Then why help me? Because you didn't deserve this. You didn't know." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And because my mother isn't the saint she pretends to be. She had her own reasons for wanting my grandfather dead. But she spent 50 years blaming Robert instead." Before I could respond, Bright headlights swept across my living room window. Natalie jumped to her feet, her face draining of color. They found me. I have to go. What do you mean your mother had her own reasons? I grabbed her arm. I can't explain now, she said urgently. Just don't sign anything they give you. She pulled free and disappeared through my kitchen door, vanishing into the darkness of the backyard. Seconds later, someone slammed their fist against my front door. Not a knock, a furious pounding. Charlotte, open this door. Patricia's voice cut through the house, sharp with rage. I know my daughter is in there. I steadied myself and opened the door with the chain still fastened. Patricia stood there with Dennis behind her, both of them radiating anger. Where is Natalie? I don't know what you're talking about. Her car is parked 2 blocks away, Patricia snapped. We tracked her phone to this address. Her eyes were wild now, nothing like the controlled woman from before. What did she tell you? She didn't tell me anything. Dennis lunged forward. You're lying. That little traitor has been feeding you stories. I'm calling the police, I said firmly. You need to leave. Call them, Patricia laughed bitterly. And I'll tell them you're hiding evidence about a murderer. She leaned closer. That's right, Charlotte. Your precious husband was a killer. He murdered my father and stole 50 years of life he didn't deserve. The venom in her voice made my knees shake, but I didn't move. You have no proof. I have enough, she hissed, and I have lawyers who will destroy everything Robert Morrison built. When I'm done, you won't even have a roof over your head. She pressed closer to the door. He took my father from me. Now I'm taking everything from you. I slammed the door in her face, locked it, and immediately called 911. The police arrived in less than 10 minutes. Patricia and Dennis were still sitting in their Mercedes, parked across the street. 2 officers went to speak with them, while a third stayed with me on the porch to take my statement. Ma'am, have these individuals threatened you? Officer Rodriguez asked, pen hovering over his notepad. They've demanded access to my home and are making claims about my late husband, I said, wrapping my arms around myself. They're harassing me while I'm grieving. I want them to stay away from my property. After nearly 20 minutes of back and forth between the officers and the Crawfords, Patricia and Dennis finally drove off, but not before Patricia rolled down her window and called out, See you in court, Charlotte. Once the police were gone, I went through the house and checked every lock twice. Then I returned to Bob's study and started digging again. If Patricia Crawford wanted a war over the truth of Bob's past, she was going to get one. But I wasn't going to fight blind. If you're enjoying this story, please hit the subscribe button. I'm going to need all the support I can get for what happened next. I spent the entire night combing through every file in Bob's desk, every box in the attic, every hidden corner of the life we'd built together. And eventually I found something that changed everything. At 3 a.m, exhausted, shaking, and desperate, I pulled down the attic ladder. Bob and I had stored 42 years of memories up there. Christmas decorations, baby clothes, old tax returns from decades past. I had always put off sorting through it all. Now I had no choice. Box after box came down. Photo albums, Jessica's school papers, Michael's Little League trophies. Ordinary family items that made my chest ache for the life I thought I knew. Then I spotted it, a metal lockbox shoved into the far corner behind a broken lamp, coated in dust. It wasn't locked. Inside were documents I had never seen before. Bob's original birth certificate listing Robert James Crawford, a passport from 1975 in his real name, and a thick manila envelope labeled Thomas C. Final documents. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in Bob's handwriting, all addressed to his mother, none ever sent. They detailed his early months in Portland, his fear, his guilt, his desperate hope that his family would someday understand why he had left. But it was the final letter that shattered me. Mom, I know you'll never forgive me for leaving after Dad's death, but you deserve the truth. Dad didn't die because of the storm. He went out on that boat to end his own life. I found the note he wrote the night before. He was drowning in debt from Patricia's husband's failed business ventures, debts he personally guaranteed to protect her. Dennis had been stealing from the company for years, and Dad had just uncovered it. The empire was collapsing, and Dad couldn't face the disgrace. In his note, he said he loved us all, but he couldn't watch everything he built fall apart. He asked me not to tell Patricia and Dennis the truth. He wanted them to remember him with pride. So he went out alone during a storm warning. By the time I found the note, he was already gone. I tried to stop him. I swear I tried. But Patricia blamed me anyway, and I couldn't defend myself without destroying Dad's memory. So I left. I'm sorry. Robert, I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Bob hadn't killed his father. Thomas Crawford had taken his own life, and Bob had carried that devastating secret for decades to protect his father's legacy, while his own family destroyed his name. The next morning, I called the attorney Jessica had found for me Helen Vance, a sharp estate lawyer who specialized in family disputes. I brought her everything. The newspaper articles, Natalie's information about the letter to Bob's mother, and most importantly, Bob's own handwritten confession explaining the truth. Helen spread the documents across her conference room table and read in silence. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. "This is going to get ugly," she said. "Patricia Crawford has already filed a civil lawsuit claiming your husband defrauded the Crawford estate. She's demanding 50 years of what she calls wrongful inheritance, essentially half of everything you and Bob built together." "Can she win?" I asked. "Not if we fight back," Helen replied. "But Charlotte, you need to understand this will expose parts of your husband's past. It won't be easy." "I don't care about the pain anymore," I said. "I care about the truth." 2 weeks later, Helen filed our response. We didn't just deny Patricia's claims. We went on the offensive. We submitted Bob's letter detailing Thomas Crawford's suicide statement from people in Portland who had known Bob for decades, and a detailed financial timeline proving that everything Bob built came from his own work, not stolen money. And then we subpoenaed the Crawford family's financial records from 1975. That's when things got interesting. The records revealed that Patricia's husband, Lawrence Cunningham, had poured money into a real estate venture that collapsed in early 1975 using Thomas Crawford as the financial guarantor. When the deal failed, Thomas was suddenly responsible for nearly $3 million in debt. Patricia had known. She knew her husband's business failures were crushing her father, yet she never told the rest of the family. And after Thomas died, his life insurance policy conveniently paid off most of that debt. Helen scheduled depositions. Patricia was required to testify under oath. Dennis was as well, and it came out that he had been embezzling from Crawford properties for years, exactly as Bob's letter had described. The night before my own deposition, Natalie called me. "Mrs. Morrison, I think you should know something. My mother's planning to withdraw the lawsuit." "What?" I said, stunned. "Her lawyers told her she's going to lose badly. If this goes to trial, everything comes out. Dennis could face criminal charges. My mother could even be implicated in insurance fraud." Natalie's voice softened. "She's going to drop the case, but she'll never admit she was wrong. She'll tell people you bought your way out of it." "I don't care what she tells people," I said. "I care about protecting what Bob and I built." "I know," Natalie replied. "That's why I'm calling. There's one more thing." She hesitated. "I found the suicide note, the original one Robert mentioned in his letter. My grandmother kept it hidden in a safe deposit box. She never wanted Patricia or Dennis to know the truth. When my grandmother passed, the box was transferred to me. Can you send it to my lawyer?" I asked. "I already did," Natalie said. "It's postmarked today." Mrs. Morrison, Robert was telling the truth. My grandfather's note explains everything. She swallowed hard. He apologized to his children. He detailed his financial situation, and he specifically told Robert not to blame himself, because you were the only one who tried to stop me. Her voice cracked. "My mother has spent 50 years hating the wrong person." 3 days later, Patricia Crawford's attorney called Helen Vance and formally withdrew the lawsuit. There was no apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just a sterile legal notice stating that after reviewing the evidence, they were discontinuing their claim. Helen called me immediately. "Charlotte, it's over. They dropped everything. You keep the house, the accounts, everything. They're not getting a cent." I should have felt relief, even victory. Instead, I felt exhausted and deeply heartbroken for the man I loved. A man who spent decades running from a past he couldn't escape, carrying secrets to protect a father who gave up, living in fear that the truth would one day find him. Despite it all, he built a beautiful life. Despite the lies he had to tell. Despite a family that never forgave him for surviving when their father didn't. After the lawsuit ended, I believed peace had finally come. But 3 weeks later, Dennis Crawford appeared at my door alone this time, and nothing like the aggressive man who once stood beside Patricia. "Mrs. Morrison," he said quietly, standing on my porch with his hat in his hands. "May I have 5 minutes? Just 5. I know I don't deserve it." Every instinct told me to shut the door, but something in his face, regret, maybe, Shame made me stop. 5 minutes, I said. On the porch. The door stays open. He nodded. I came to apologize, Dennis said. Not because my lawyer told me to. Not because I want anything. But because it's the right thing to do. He took a shaky breath. I was stealing from my father's company in 1975. Robert knew. He caught me and confronted me. I begged him not to tell our father. Promised I'd repay everything. My stomach clenched. But Robert said he couldn't carry that kind of secret. So you let him take the blame for your father's death, I said. Yes, Dennis whispered. I knew he didn't kill Dad. I always knew. But it was easier to let Patricia believe he did. Easier to make him the villain than face what my theft had done. Why tell me now? Because I've lived with that guilt for 50 years, he said, his voice breaking. Because my brother rebuilt his life into something good, and I tried to destroy it even after he was gone. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is for you. It's a check for $75,000. It doesn't come close to covering your legal costs, or what you went through, but it's all I can afford. Please take it. I don't want your money, I said. I know, he replied. But I need you to take it. I need to do one decent thing after 50 years of cowardice. His eyes were wet. Robert was a good man, always the good one. And he loved you. I could see it in the life he built. I'm sorry I tried to take that away from you. He placed the envelope on the porch railing and walked away without waiting for an answer. I stood there watching him drive off. Then I picked up the envelope. Inside was the check and a short handwritten note. Patricia will never apologize. She's too proud. But for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Dennis. The next day, I deposited the check and donated every dollar to the library where Bob and I first met. They used it to create a senior reading program. A small plaque was installed in memory of Robert Morrison, who believed everyone deserved a second chapter. That felt right. Bob had spent his entire second chapter trying to be better than the first had allowed him to be, and he succeeded. Slowly, life began to feel normal again. Jessica and Michael visited more often. We spent long evenings talking about their father, the real stories. Not the mythology I had built over 42 years. They deserved to know the truth about the complicated, flawed, brave man who raised them. Patricia never contacted me again, according to Natalie. She moved to Florida shortly after the lawsuit ended and refuses to speak about Robert to this day. Some people, I learned, would rather cling to hatred than face uncomfortable truths. Natalie and I stayed in touch. She sent me old photos of young Robert, before he became Bob, before he fled Seattle when he was just a 22-year-old trying to survive impossible family expectations. In those pictures, I saw the man I married. The same kind eyes. The same slightly crooked smile. 6 months after everything ended, I finally finished sorting through Bob's study. In the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, I found one last letter. This one was addressed to me. It was dated just 3 weeks before he died. Charlotte, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the secrets I kept. I'm sorry for the life I left behind in Seattle, and the lies I had to tell to build a new one. But I'm not sorry for finding you. You were the best part of my second chance. Everything good I became started the day I walked into that library fundraiser, saw you arguing with the coordinator about where the dessert table should go. You were magnificent. You still are. Don't let anyone make you doubt the life we built together. It was real. Every moment. If my past comes back to haunt you, and I fear it might, please know I never stopped being the man you married. I just became him in Portland instead of Seattle. I love you. I'm sorry. I always will. Bob, I cried when I finished reading it. Not tears of grief this time, tears of acceptance. Bob had been right. Our life was real. The home we shared. The children we raised. The quiet nights reading. Side by side, none of it was a lie, simply because he changed his name. Today I'm still in our house, still volunteering at the library. Still living the life Bob and I built one day at a time. The strangers who appeared at his funeral tried to take that away. They said I'd been married to a murderer. They claimed everything I knew was false. They were wrong. I was married to a man who made mistakes, carried unbearable secrets, and chose every single day to be better than his worst moment. A man who protected his father's memory. A man who built something beautiful from the ashes of his past. That's who Bob Morrison was. And no one, not Patricia, not Dennis, not the past, can ever take that truth away from me. Because Natalie had been right about her mother.